Hello, folks, and thank you guys for checking out our annual meeting this year via PowerPoint. My name is Dana Boyle, and I'm president of the Northern Neck Vegetable Growers Association, and I welcome you. We would love to be able to be with you all this year in person to fellowship and have lunch together and all that fun stuff. But since that could not happen, I will instead take this time to thank our extension agents, Stephanie and Trent, for putting together this information pack program. For those of you joining us that are not members of the Northern Neck Vegetable Growers Association, please consider contacting me or one of our members or one of our extension agents to find out more about our educational programs, our educational trips, our scholarship, and more. We'd love to share more information with you about our fun association.
Hi everyone, my name is Lorena Lopez, and today I'm going to talk about the Melonworm and Pickleworm monitoring program that myself and Tom Kuhar started for the state of Virginia. So to talk about these pests, I have to start by saying that they both move north from overwintering sites in Florida where they undergo multiple generations, and they start moving up to Georgia, South, and North Carolina, infested cucurbit crops. These moths are restricted to the genus Cucurbita, so they only infest cucurbit crops, which is good news for the other vegetable growers, but not for cucurbit growers. So when they arrive to Virginia in summer, depending on this area of the state, you can detect infestations from July to October. They prefer summer squash, several varieties of summer squash, several varieties of zucchini squash, especially the yellow zucchini, yellow summer squash. And they prefer these hosts over cantaloupes and watermelons. It doesn't mean that they don't infest them. They just prefer summer squash, and when the summer squash is gone, they can still infest melons and watermelons. 2021 was a particular year for both melonworms and pickleworms, just because we detected high infestation levels throughout the eastern of the United States. They were everywhere pretty much over summer squash in Florida, in Virginia, in Georgia, and North Carolina. And they were found on commercial fields and also in home gardens. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about each of these pests, just to give you key characteristics for you to be able to identify these pests. This is very important for you to manage them properly. So I'm going to start with the melonworm. This is Diaphania hyalinata. The adults, as you see here in the top picture, are active during the day, but they can also be active at night. When they're active during the day, you can see them in the open flowers and just hanging on the leaves. And the adults are very distinctive. The females lay their eggs on the underside of the leaves. They're very flat, they're yellow, and they're very hard to see, so they're often overlooked. The larvae, as you see in the middle picture, it's light green, usually with two very characteristic white lines in the back. They're always there, and the light green doesn't vary that much through the development of the larvae. They undergo 5 instars, and the size from these instars ranges from 0.05 inches to 0.6 inches long. So when they are mature, when they undergo their final instar stage, they pupate by rolling the leaves over them, and then they pupate, as you see here in the bottom picture. In the case of pickleworm, Diaphania nitidalis, the adults, as you see here in the middle picture, are only active at night. It is very hard to see them during the day. However, as you can see, they're very, very similar to melonworm adults. So they are very hard to differentiate using the adult stage. So the larva stage is the one that we use to separate the species. The females lay their eggs close to the flowers or the flower buds, and their eggs are very similar to melonworms as well, unfortunately. So the larvae hatches and go in burrows into the flower buds or the growing fruit or the mature fruit, where it feeds and develops. The larvae color varies from light green to translucent with multiple dark spots. As you see here, this is a key characteristic to differentiate pickleworms from melonworms. Here in the bottom pictures, you can see the dark spots. There are no white lines, as you can see on the melonworms, just these dark spots. And in the bottom part, you can see a mature larvae, and in the top picture, you can see the entry hole of a very, very young larvae. And in that also have the characteristic dark spots. The size is very similar to the larva of melonworms as well. So the melonworms are known because the larvae feeds on the leaves and skeletonize them, and they sometimes burrows into the fruit. So this is textbook, and this is actually what you see in Florida where these pests overwinters. You most of the time see the melonworms feeding on the leaves, always on the leaves, and very rarely on the fruit. This is not the case for Virginia. What we've seen here is most of the fruit being eaten by these melonworms. They are most of the time feeding inside the fruit, and we have rarely seen them feeding on the leaves here in Virginia, which is very, very interesting. And in the case of pickleworms, they're known everywhere because they burrow into the flower buds and the fruits, and they develop on them. And what we've seen in 2021 and several years before here in Virginia is that they do that. You can find them in the fruit, but when the melonworms are around, where there are a lot of melonworms around, you most of the time only found the pickleworms in the flower buds. So it seems like there is an interesting interaction here where they're separating their sites of infestation, and it seems like melonworms are taking over the fruits while the pickleworms are taking over the flower buds. Both of them can also feed on the surface of the fruit, leaving these scars that have given them the characteristic and the very well-known name of ringworms. Both can do that, and we've seen that in the Chesapeake area. Here you can see some pictures of the entry holes and how the fruit looks inside when it's being eaten by the melonworms. In this case, in the zucchini squash, you can see we have also seen them feeding on pumpkins this year. But these entry holes are not the only thing that make this fruit unmarketable. They're already unmarketable because they have holes on them, but also these are open wounds that make this fruit susceptible to fungal and bacterial diseases. And these bacterial diseases also spread to other fruits and other parts of the plant, as you see here. And the most commonly found is Coanephora fruit rot. That's the one that you see here in the pictures. So based on all these information that I've given you, how are we monitoring pickleworms and melonworms, and how can you monitor them, given that there are so many challenges, such as, for example, the adult moths don't fly to light traps as most moths do. The sex pheromones of these pests is known. It has been described, it has been studied, but there is no commercial pheromone lure to monitor or manage these pests, unfortunately. The eggs and the young larvae are very difficult to spot. This is a melonworm egg. They're very similar to the pickleworm eggs too. And they're very small, they're very flat, and they're often overlooked. And the older larvae can be detected, but by the time that you find them, because the leaf has been eaten or the fruit has holes on them, and you can see the frass or the gummy residues that they leave on the chewed fruit. But this time is very late because that fruit is already unmarketable and your plant has already a lot of damage. So how are we monitoring pickleworm and mellowworm effectively? So the best way to do it is to use the flower buds sampling unit to check constantly the young grown fruit and check constantly mature fruit too. Beware of adults on open flowers or on leaves, but don't rely only on monitoring adults. It is very important that you check since the time you start seeing flower buds, because the earlier you detect infestation, the better you will be able to manage these pests. In Florida, there have been studies using yellow sticky traps to monitor melonworm adults, and you can see them in the yellow sticky traps. So this may be a useful method that we're going to try next year for melonworm adults, but remember that sometimes they can only fly, they can also fly at night. So this is something that may have potential to monitor these pests. But there's also another alternative, and is the use of yellow summer squash to monitor as a trap crop. So this was used in October 2019, and the field observations from this trial showed a good potential to monitor pickleworm and melonworms because they are attracted to this summer squash. So they can be lured into them instead of the actual cash crop that you want to keep them out of. What we saw in 2019 was also that there were no worms found in pumpkins or winter squash, but remember that in 2021, I want to tell you, we did find them in pumpkins. So I'm going to summarize what we found with the monitoring program for Virginia this year. For the Eastern Shore, we found both melonworms and pickleworms detected in summer through the entire fall season in zucchini, summer squash, especially yellow squash, crookneck squash, and pumpkins. We found them in pumpkins that were already, they continue to be attached to the plants, but also pumpkins that were already harvested. That was the same case for the Chesapeake area, where we found pickleworms burrowing into garden-grown pumpkins, the ones that were in the plant, but also the ones that people were putting outside their doors. They were burrowing into those pumpkins. And this was later in the season, around October, when most of the summer squash was gone. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And in the case of the northern neck, growers there were very lucky because I was there several times and checked zucchini squash, crookneck squash, and pumpkin fields, and there was no evidence of worm infestation. So that's good news. And the other thing that I want to mention is the timeline of infestations for melonworms and pickleworms. But to do this, I also want to mention another pest that is important and overlaps with melonworms and pickleworm infestations. So you may have heard, of course, about the squash vine borer, or may have issues with that before. So this is the first Lepidopteran pest that appears in summer. This is very, very dangerous pest too, but it's very different than melonworm and pickleworm. The larva of the squash vine borer is larger than melonworms and pickleworms. It's white, it's bigger, and it doesn't look at all like these other two moths. And the other key thing is that they burrow into the stem of the plant, not the fruit, not the flower, the base of the stem of the plant. So what you can see in your plant is that the plants start wilting. They start wilting because the stem is being eaten by this huge worm. So you can find these in summer. They start arriving and they peak in July and August. And then in summer, you can also start seeing some melonworms feeding on your growing fruit. And then in late summer, you find the peak of melonworms, but you also start seeing some pickleworms in late summer throughout the fall feeding on your flower buds. So this is a very dangerous pest mix that you could have on your plants. And in late summer, you can find all three pests on your plant, which is very, very dangerous. So that's what I'm mentioning, that monitoring and also recognizing the differences between these pests, it's very important to manage them effectively. And the best way to do that is monitoring. Monitor early so you can detect infestations early and plan your pesticide applications wisely, because it is preferred for you to apply pesticides when the larva it's young and they have a just hatched, because they will be outside and you can kill them with contact pesticides. Once they burrow into the plant, you're only going to be able to kill them by using systemic pesticides. So the systemic pesticides are preferred once the worms are already inside your plants. And there are some examples like Asana, Warrior, Bifenthrin, but please don't rely only on this type of pesticide, because these are all pyrethroids. And you have to be aware of aphid outbreaks, because unfortunately pyrethroids cause outbreaks of aphids. So there are other non-pyrethroid options. These are only examples, but there are some other options. And you can always, of course, follow your rotation of pesticides, but there are all alternatives to use together with pesticides like sanitations. If you find any fruit, flower, or plant that is infested with this pest, make sure to destroy this residue so the moths don't finish their developing cycle. And also, if you have the option of using row covers for your cucurbits, they will effectively exclude the moths at the earliest stages of the crop, which means before blooming. So these 3 or 4 weeks before your flowers are open are going to help you significantly if you keep those moths out of your plants, because the plants are going to be able to grow a little bit, and if they get some damage, they may be able to compensate because they're older. If they get infested very early in their development, they may be killed easier. So be aware of that if you're able to use the row covers as a management technique. So with this, I just want to thank you for listening, and here is my information. If you have any questions, if you have anything that I could help, I'll be glad to help. And thank you again.
Please take a moment to complete the brief survey links below. Your responses will give us a better understanding of how we are doing and how we may better serve your needs in the future. To access the survey, you may scan the QR code on the left using your smartphone's camera or QR code scanning app, or enter the link on the right into your internet browser. Thank you.